What if I told you that during one of Muhammad Ali's most controversial press conferences, a woman stood up and called him a coward so brutally that 200 journalists fell silent in shock? His handlers were ready to end the conference immediately. The cameras were rolling. Ali had every right to walk out and leave her humiliated in front of the world's media. But what the greatest did instead was so unexpected, so profoundly compassionate, that it transformed a moment of public hostility into a masterclass in human grace that left an entire room in tears. This wasn't just handling a hostile reporter. This was a moment that proved true. Courage isn't about winning fights in the ring. It's about choosing understanding, even when you're being attacked in front of millions of people. If this story moves you, hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below about a time when someone's grace changed your perspective. Your story might inspire someone else today. April 28, 1967. The New York Hilton press conference room was packed beyond capacity as Muhammad Ali faced the media 3 days after refusing induction into the United States Armed Forces. 250 journalists, photographers, and television crews had crammed into a space designed for half that number, and the atmosphere was electric with tension and hostility. Ali was at the peak of his boxing career, the undisputed heavyweight champion of the world. But to much of America in 1967, he was something else entirely. A draft dodger, a traitor, a man who had betrayed his country in its time of need. The press conference had been called by Ali's legal team in an attempt to explain his position on the Vietnam War and his refusal to be inducted into military service. But everyone in that room knew this wasn't really about explanation or understanding. This was about judgment, condemnation, and the systematic dismantling of a man's reputation in the court of public opinion. Among the crowd of mostly hostile journalists sat Sarah Mitchell, a 32-year-old sports reporter for the Chicago Tribune who had built her career on tough, no-nonsense coverage of the boxing world. Sarah was considered one of the best in her field, respected for her thorough research and her willingness to ask the questions other reporters avoided. But Sarah wasn't at this press conference as a neutral observer. She was there carrying a weight of grief and rage that had been building for 6 months, ever since the telegram had arrived at her parents' home with the news that would shatter their family forever. Her younger brother, James Mitchell, had been killed in action near Da Nang on October 15, 1966. He was 22 years old, fresh out of college, drafted into a war he didn't fully understand, but determined to serve his country with honor. James had written to Sarah every week from Vietnam, letters full of fear and homesickness, but also pride in his service and hope that his sacrifice meant something. The last letter had arrived 2 days after the telegram, a cruel twist of timing that made James's death feel even more unbearable. Sarah had spent the past 6 months watching her parents age a decade in grief, attending memorial services with other Gold Star families, and struggling to understand why her brilliant, kind, funny little brother had to die in a jungle on the other side of the world. And through all of that pain, she'd been watching Muhammad Ali, this famous boxer, this man with all the privilege and opportunity in the world, refuse to serve the country that had made him rich and famous. The hypocrisy of it burned in Sarah's chest like acid. While her brother lay in a cemetery in Illinois, while thousands of other young men were dying in rice paddies and jungles, Muhammad Ali stood in his expensive suit, surrounded by lawyers and handlers, claiming that his religion and his conscience wouldn't allow him to fight for his country. It made Sarah physically sick with anger. Ali sat at the front of the room, flanked by his legal team and advisors, facing a wall of cameras and hostile faces. He looked tired but composed, his famous swagger somewhat subdued by the gravity of the situation he faced. He was risking everything: his boxing license, his championship titles, his freedom, potentially 5 years in federal prison, all because of his beliefs about the war and his identity as a black Muslim. The first hour of the press conference had been brutal but predictable. Journalists had fired hostile questions at Ali, challenging his patriotism, his religious conversion, his motives, and his character. Ali had responded with his usual combination of quick wit and serious conviction, but the mood in the room remained hostile and unconvinced. "Mr. Ali, how can you call yourself the greatest when you won't fight for your country?" one reporter demanded. "I'm fighting for my people, my beliefs, and my freedom," Ali responded calmly. "That takes a different kind of courage than what happens in a boxing ring." "You're hiding behind religion," another journalist called out. "You're using the Nation of Islam as an excuse to dodge the draft." "My faith is real and my beliefs are sincere," Ali said firmly. "No man, no government, no war is more important than my relationship with God." The questions continued, each one more aggressive than the last, and Ali handled them with remarkable patience and grace. But Sarah Mitchell had been sitting in the third row, her anger building with each of Ali's carefully worded responses, her grief transforming into rage at this man who seemed so comfortable in his decision to refuse service while her brother was dead. Finally, Sarah couldn't contain herself any longer. She stood up abruptly, her chair scraping loudly against the floor, drawing the attention of everyone in the room. Her voice when she spoke was shaking with emotion, but carried clearly through the suddenly silent conference room. "How dare you," Sarah said, her words cutting through the air like a blade. "How dare you sit there in your expensive suit and call yourself the greatest while you refuse to serve your country? My brother died in Vietnam 6 months ago. He was 22 years old, Mr. Ali. He was drafted just like you. He didn't want to go. He was scared, but he went anyway because that's what you do when your country calls." The room had fallen completely silent. Cameras swiveled to capture Sarah's face, twisted with grief and anger. Ali's handlers immediately moved to end the confrontation, but Ali raised his hand, signaling them to stop. Sarah wasn't finished. The dam had broken, and 6 months of suppressed grief and rage came flooding out. "James wrote to me every week from Vietnam. He talked about the fear, the confusion, the horrible things he saw. But you know what else he talked about? His duty, his honor, his belief that service to country mattered more than personal comfort or convenience." Tears were streaming down Sarah's face now, but her voice remained strong and accusatory. "And you? You're a champion boxer, someone who's supposed to exemplify courage and strength, and you're hiding behind religion and to avoid serving? You're not the greatest, Mr. Ali. You're a coward. My brother was brave. You're a coward who's spitting on everything my brother died for." The silence in the room after Sarah finished speaking was absolute. 200 journalists who made their living with words were struck completely speechless by the raw emotion and moral challenge that Sarah had just laid before Muhammad Ali. His legal team was signaling frantically that he should end that engaging with this kind of personal attack would only make things worse. But Ali stood up slowly, his expression serious but not defensive, and addressed Sarah directly. "Miss, what was your brother's name?" Ali asked quietly. The question caught Sarah off guard. She had expected anger, defensiveness, perhaps a dismissive comment about not understanding his position. She hadn't expected this gentle inquiry about James. "James," Sarah said, her voice cracking. "James Mitchell. He was 22. He loved baseball and Bob Dylan, and he wanted to be a teacher." Ali nodded slowly, his eyes never leaving Sarah's face. "James Mitchell. Would you tell me about him? Not about how he died, but about who he was." Sarah was confused now, her anger momentarily disrupted by this unexpected request. "I... what?" "Your brother James," Ali repeated gently. "You said he loved baseball and Bob Dylan. Tell me more. Help me understand who he was." For a moment, Sarah just stared at Ali, uncertain how to respond to this compassionate curiosity in the middle of what should have been a hostile confrontation. Then slowly she began talking about James, about his terrible jokes that always made her laugh anyway, about how he taught her to throw a curveball in their backyard, about his dream of teaching history to high school students, about the letter he'd written from basic training, terrified but determined. Ali listened intently, and when Sarah finished, he spoke with a sincerity that surprised everyone in the room, including Sarah herself. Miss Mitchell, your brother James sounds like he was a remarkable young man, and I'm deeply sorry for your loss. The pain you're feeling, that grief and anger, it's real and it's valid, and you have every right to it. Ali paused, choosing his words carefully. You called me a coward, and I understand why you feel that way. Your brother went to war when he was called. He faced his fear and did what he believed was right. That took enormous courage, and his sacrifice deserves respect and honor. The room remained silent, everyone listening intently to this extraordinary moment unfolding before them. But Miss Mitchell, Ali continued, his voice gentle but firm, let me ask you something. Does courage only look one way? Your brother had the courage to go to war when he was afraid. That's one kind of bravery. But what about the courage to stand up against the whole country, to risk everything I've worked for, to face prison and the loss of my career because I believe this war is wrong? Isn't that courage too? Sarah opened her mouth to respond, but Ali raised his hand gently, asking her to let him finish. I'm not saying my courage is greater than your brother's, or that my choice is more right than his. I'm saying there are different kinds of courage facing different kinds of battles. Your brother fought for what he believed in. So am I. He risked his life for his beliefs. I'm risking my freedom and my career for mine. Ali walked closer to where Sarah was standing, his movement emphasizing the personal nature of their conversation, despite the cameras in the crowd. You know what I think, Miss Mitchell? I think you're not really angry at me. I think you're angry at a war that took your brother. You're angry at the government that sent him there. You're angry at the unfairness of losing someone you love. And I'm an easy target for that anger because I'm visible and I'm making a choice that seems to disrespect James's sacrifice. Sarah was crying openly now, the anger that had sustained her for 6 months beginning to crumble under the weight of Ali's gentle understanding. But here's the truth, Ali said, his voice filled with emotion. I honor your brother's service. I respect his courage. And I believe that if James and I could sit down and talk, even though we made different choices, we might understand that we were both fighting for something we believed in. He fought for his country in Vietnam. I'm fighting for my people's freedom and equality right here at home. Different battles, Miss Mitchell, but both require courage. The room was so quiet that the sound of camera shutters clicking seemed deafening. Sarah stood there, tears streaming down her face, her entire body shaking with the emotional release of 6 months of suppressed grief. I miss him so much, Sarah whispered, her voice broken. And I don't understand why he had to die. I don't understand it either, Ali said softly. And I wish I had answers that would make your pain less. But Miss Mitchell, I can promise you this. Your brother's death won't be meaningless if it helps us ask the hard questions about war and peace, about courage and duty, about when to fight and when to refuse to fight. James's sacrifice and my stand, they're both part of the same conversation about what it means to be brave in difficult times. What happened next shocked everyone in the room. Sarah Mitchell, the reporter who had come to condemn Muhammad Ali as a coward, found herself walking forward and embracing him, sobbing into his shoulder as 6 months of grief finally found release. And Ali, the man who had been called a traitor and a coward by millions, held this grieving sister with genuine compassion, letting her cry without judgment or defensiveness. The cameras captured it all. The image of Muhammad Ali embracing the crying reporter would appear on front pages across the country the next day, and the footage of their exchange would be played and replayed on television news programs for weeks. When Sarah finally stepped back, she looked at Ali with red, swollen eyes and said something that would change both of their lives. I'm sorry. You're not a coward. I was wrong. You're just a man making an incredibly difficult choice based on what you believe, just like James did. I'm sorry I couldn't see that until now. Ali smiled gently. You have nothing to apologize for, Miss Mitchell. Grief makes us say and do things we might not otherwise. Your love for your brother, that fierce protective anger that shows how deeply he was loved. That's a gift, not something to apologize for. Ali then turned to address the entire room of journalists. Ladies and gentlemen, what just happened here is more important than any statement I could make about the draft or the war. Miss Mitchell just showed us all something beautiful. She showed us that it's possible to be angry and hurt and wrong, and then to have the courage to change your mind when you encounter a different perspective. That's real strength. That's real courage. The aftermath of that press conference created ripples that extended far beyond anyone's expectations. Sarah Mitchell's article about the encounter, published in the Chicago Tribune 2 days later, was unlike anything she had ever written. Instead of the condemning piece she'd intended to write, she produced a deeply personal essay about grief, anger, and the unexpected grace of Muhammad Ali. I went to that press conference ready to destroy Muhammad Ali, Sarah wrote. I wanted to expose him as a coward and a fraud. Instead, he showed me what real courage looks like. Not the courage to fight, but the courage to listen to someone who's attacking you. The courage to respond to hatred with understanding. The courage to see the pain behind the anger and address that, instead of the anger itself. Sarah's piece went viral in the pre-internet sense of the phrase. It was reprinted in newspapers across the country, discussed on television talk shows, and cited by both opponents and supporters of the war as an example of the complexity of the national debate over Vietnam. But more importantly, Sarah's transformation had a profound impact on how other Gold Star families viewed Ali's stance. While many still disagreed with his refusal to serve, they began to understand that his position came from genuine conviction rather than cowardice. The conversation shifted from simple condemnation to more nuanced discussion about courage, duty, and the right to conscientious objection. Sarah and Ali maintained correspondence for years after that press conference. She covered his return to boxing in 1970, his incredible fights against Joe Frazier and George Foreman, and his eventual decline due to Parkinson's disease. She became one of his most articulate defenders in the press, not because she agreed with all of his positions, but because she had witnessed firsthand his capacity for grace under pressure. When Muhammad Ali died in 2016, Sarah Mitchell was among those who spoke at memorial services, sharing the story of that April day in 1967, when she had called him a coward, and he had responded by teaching her what courage really means. Ali could have destroyed me that day, Sarah said in her tribute. I attacked him publicly, called him a coward, questioned his integrity in front of the world's media. He had every right to defend himself, to attack back, to have me removed from that press conference. Instead, he asked me about my brother. He listened to my pain. He helped me understand that courage isn't one-dimensional, that bravery can look different in different circumstances, Sarah continued, her voice thick with emotion. Muhammad Ali taught me that real strength isn't about winning fights or defending yourself against attacks. It's about having the wisdom to see past someone's anger to the pain that's driving it. It's about choosing understanding over retaliation, compassion over condemnation. My brother James died believing he was serving something greater than himself. Ali lived his life serving something greater than himself too. They were both heroes, just fighting different battles. The legacy of that press conference proved that sometimes our harshest critics can become our greatest advocates, and that choosing grace in moments of attack can create transformations that echo through decades. Ali's gentle response to Sarah's grief-driven anger didn't just change one reporter's mind. It changed how millions of people thought about courage, conviction, and the complexity of moral choices in difficult times. This story reminds us that our greatest moments often come not when we're being praised, but when we're being attacked. Muhammad Ali could have destroyed Sarah Mitchell that day with a cutting response or dismissive gesture. Instead, he chose to understand her pain and respond with grace. He showed us that true courage isn't about fighting back. It's about fighting for understanding, even with those who see us as enemies. That's the real meaning of being the greatest.